But investors aren't just worried about the quantity of debt. They're beginning to worry about its quality too. One reason bond yields have been surging is that investors are starting to question the creditworthiness of an AI-fueled debt binge of this magnitude. And this is where the stakes become. In my view, Besson was forced to move not so much by the immediate fiscal cost of higher yields, but by the risk that surging bond yields would choke off the AI capex boom. So much money has already been invested that the AI party cannot stop now without triggering a financial and economic reckoning. This is why Trump will not allow long-term interest rates to keep going up. Faced with the choice, he will choose financial repression over an AI bust. I had suspected as much. This week, we got confirmation. But Trump should be careful not to underestimate the bond market like he underestimated Iran. He has opened Pandora's box, and he won't be able to close it.
精彩集锦已经把问题挑明了，美国如今不是在治理风险，而是在给一场越吹越大的 AI 盛宴续命。大家好，这里是华人视角频道。面对债券殖利率上升，川普政府没有选择收缩开支、修复信用，反而直接出手压住长端利率，仿佛只要把温度计砸了，发烧就算治好了。更有意思的是 ，Anthropic 准备上市 ，OpenAI 扩建数据中心偏偏和美国财政部加大购债发生在同一周。表面看这是稳定市场，实际上却像是在为 AI 泡沫铺设更便宜的融资通道。问题是债务规模越来越大，质量却未必跟得上，中国模型又在更便宜、更高效的逼近。美国企业一边担心竞争，一边试图用禁令把对手挡在门外。可市场不是潘朵拉的盒子，想开就开，想关就关。接下来我们就来看看华盛顿究竟在害怕什么， Anthropic 的上市为何成了整个 AI 投资题材的公投，以及债券、美元、黄金和中美科技战最后会怎样互相牵动。
First came tariffs and export controls. Then came the rescue of Intel. Then came currency intervention. But nothing quite compares with Treasury's decision this week to double its buybacks of long-dated government bonds. You can call it whatever you want. But to me, what matters is that the U.S. has crossed the Rubicon, the traditional boundary between debt management and monetary policy. Trump has decided that he doesn't need to go through the Fed to lower interest rates. This is the message from the issuer of the world's reserve currency. The United States will not allow the bond market to stop it from spending money it doesn't have. The long-term market implications are pretty obvious. To the extent that this sets a precedent, not just for the rest of this administration, but for every administration that follows, it is about as bearish for the US dollar as it gets, especially against gold. This is the beginning of a slippery slope. What it means in the short term is less obvious. To me, the move says a lot about how far Trump may be prepared to go to keep the AI bubble going, and what he might do next. Scott Bessent, who spent years managing money for George Soros, understands perfectly well the risk he's taking. So the question is, why? In my view, it was no coincidence that Bessent's move to cap long-term interest rates happened in the same week that OpenAI announced a massive data center project and Anthropic signaled its intention to go public as early as October. Bond yields had jumped on the AI news, as markets immediately grasped the implications for the supply of bombs coming down the pipeline. Although the market has yet to decide what AI capex ultimately means for interest rates in the long term, there's no longer much doubt about what it means in the short term. It is bearish for bonds. With hyperscalers moving into negative free cash flow and capex spending growing faster than earnings, more AI capex increasingly means more debt issuance. And the market is increasingly looking beyond the next few months. A Wall Street Journal analysis last week found that 9 US tech companies had already committed some $3 trillion off balance sheet, mostly to AI-related equipment and future data center leases. That all but guarantees that the supply of AI-related debt will keep ramping up for years to come. But investors aren't just worried about the quantity of debt. They're beginning to worry about its quality too. One reason bond yields have been surging is that investors are starting to question the creditworthiness of an AI-fueled debt binge of this magnitude. And this is where the stakes become. In my view, Besson was forced to move not so much by the immediate fiscal cost of higher yields, but by the risk that surging bond yields would choke off the AI capex boom. So much money has already been invested that the AI party cannot stop now without triggering a financial and economic reckoning. This is why Trump will not allow long-term interest rates to keep going up. Faced with the choice, he will choose financial repression over an AI bust. I had suspected as much. This week, we got confirmation. But Trump should be careful not to underestimate the bond market like he underestimated Iran. He has opened Pandora's box, and he won't be able to close it again. As I've explained in many previous videos, my problem with the AI trade is not the technology itself, but the potential difficulty of monetizing it. I've argued over the past year that the biggest risk facing the AI trade is the inevitability of commoditization. And the threat posed by the rise of cheap, incompetent Chinese models is no longer hypothetical. It is already here. Consistent with my prediction, OpenAI said this week that not only did its revenue growth slow sharply in Q2, but its profit margin also shrank. In my view, a major reason, if not the main reason, was the loss of pricing power resulting from intensifying competition from China. At first glance, Anthropic appears to have avoided the same fate. Its revenue more than doubled sequentially to about $11.6 billion in Q2, and remarkably, or perhaps not, it even generated a small adjusted operating profit. But the question is whether Anthropic has genuinely escaped commoditization, or whether it is simply a few quarters behind OpenAI. Logic suggests the latter. Claude Mythos was launched in April. 4 months later, Anthropic has made it available to only a small number of carefully vetted organizations. Mythos may be the most advanced model in the world, but the very capabilities that make it so powerful also make it potentially dangerous, and therefore extraordinarily difficult to monetize at scale. Then there is Claude Code, arguably the biggest reason Anthropic has so far been able to defy the commoditization trend. But here too, competition is intensifying rapidly. Coding is precisely the kind of application where Chinese models have been making enormous strides. More importantly, coding offers relatively little protection from commoditization. Switching costs are low, and customers can readily move between models based on performance and price. Call me nuts, but I suspect, all else being equal, this is as good as it's going to get for Anthropic. And the timing of its planned IPO makes me wonder whether Dario Amodei suspects the same. The question is whether the market will see through it. If it doesn't, the AI capex boom could keep going for another year or longer. In that scenario, bond yields will keep going up, the dollar will remain strong, and the AI infrastructure stocks will outperform. If it does, however, July's correction in the AI trade may turn out to have been just a dress rehearsal. In that scenario, rates will go down, the dollar will decline, and the AI infrastructure stocks will fall further. The Anthropic IPO is shaping up to be a referendum on the entire AI trade. Because of this, Silicon Valley and Washington are heavily invested in its success. This is where Donald Trump enters. The AI trade faces two risks: surging interest rates and intensifying Chinese competition. Trump showed us this week that he will not allow rising interest rates to spoil Anthropic's party. But this may not be enough. The Trump administration is reportedly considering restrictions on Chinese AI models. This could become one of the most consequential economic decisions Trump makes all year, because shutting Chinese models out of the US market wouldn't merely be another front in the US-China technology war. It could protect the economics of the entire American AI investment boom. Think about the chain. Chinese models become more capable and cheaper. American companies switch to them. token prices collapse. OpenAI and Anthropic lose pricing power. Expected returns on American AI infrastructure fall. Eventually, hyperscalers have to reconsider how much capital they're investing, but restrict access to Chinese models, and the chain changes completely. American companies are pushed back towards Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and American open-weight models. US model providers retain greater pricing power. Their revenue grows faster. They buy more compute, and hyperscalers have a much stronger incentive to keep building data centers. In other words, restrictions on Chinese LLMs could keep the AI capex boom alive. By the way, banning American companies from using Chinese models is not the same thing as banning open-weight models. In fact, it will benefit American open-weight models like the new Meta Muse Glimmer and NVIDIA's Nemotron. I think the probability of meaningful restrictions is now high enough that we have to take it seriously. America's response to Chinese competition increasingly looks like this. If we cannot beat it, keep it out. Thus, the 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs and Chinese drones, the complete ban on Chinese humanoid robots and data center equipment. I think large language models are next. The question is whether Trump will announce the ban before President Xi visits in September. I don't know. What I do know is that China will retaliate. And Beijing has plenty of ways to do it. It could make life considerably more difficult for Apple in China. It could pressure Chinese smartphone manufacturers to replace Qualcomm chips with domestic alternatives. It could tighten restrictions on Micron. It could restrict exports of rare earths and other critical minerals. And it could accelerate the diversification of China's foreign exchange reserves away from the US dollar and US government bonds. Which brings us to the trades. I like gold. It will not only benefit from Washington's new interventionist policy towards long-term interest rates, but also from another escalation between the US and China. China is already preparing for a more confrontational relationship with the US. The PBOC bought nearly 20 tons of gold in July alone, the most since October 2023. I see gold also as a good hedge against my long oil position. Another trade I like is being long Broadcom and short Qualcomm. Broadcom is one of the biggest beneficiaries of continued US AI capex through custom accelerators and networking. Qualcomm, by contrast, has enormous exposures to Chinese electronic manufacturers and relatively little benefit from hyperscaler AI spending. An escalating AI tech war is bullish Broadcom but bearish Qualcomm.
这期内容真正要讨论的，表面上是债券殖利率、AI 资本支出和 Anthropic 上市计划，往深一层看，其实是在回答一个更关键的问题：当市场开始阻碍政策目标时，华盛顿究竟会选择尊重市场，还是选择直接改变市场结果？从关税、出口管制到汇率干预，再到对大型企业和战略产业的介入，川普政府已经多次释放出非常清晰的信号。那就是只要某种市场走势与政府目标发生冲突，政府就可能出手修正，甚至强行扭转。这一次财政部扩大长天期美国国债回购规模意义尤其重大，因为它触碰的已经不只是债务管理，而是逐渐进入利率形成和货币政策的范围。过去债务管理和货币政策之间通常被视为两块相对独立的领域，财政部负责发行和管理债务，联邦储备系统负责利率和流动性。但现在政府试图通过回购长天期债券来压低殖利率，实际上就是在告诉市场，即使债券投资人要求更高的回报，美国政府也未必会完全接受这种结果。只要长期利率威胁到财政扩张、经济增长，或者威胁到某些关键产业的发展，政策部门就可能直接介入，这会带来一个非常深远的后果。短期来看，压低长期利率或许能够缓解政府融资压力，也能够给股市和企业融资争取时间，但长期来看，市场会开始重新评估美国国债和美元的信用边界。投资人真正担心的不只是某一次回购规模扩大，而是这种做法会不会形成先例。今天可以为了支持 AI 产业压低殖利率， 明天也可能为了房地产、金融机构甚至更广泛的财政支出而采取类似措施。一旦市场相信政府总会在关键时刻压低利率，那么利率就不再完全由通胀、经济增长和财政纪律决定，而会越来越受到政策目标影响。对美元来说，这意味着信用基础可能被逐步削弱。相对而言，黄金不依赖任何一个政府兑现承诺，也不依赖某一种货币维持购买力，因此在财政扩张、货币贬值和地缘政治紧张同时升温的时候，黄金自然会重新受到关注。但这次政策行动还有一个非常现实的背景，那就是 AI 资本支出已经大到不能轻易刹车。OpenAI 宣布超大型数据中心计划 ，Anthropic 准备上市，云端巨头持续建设算力和数据中心，背后都需要巨额资金。问题在于，企业的资本支出增长速度正在超过盈利增长速度。很多公司未来几年已经做出了规模庞大的设备采购承诺和数据中心租赁承诺。这些债务虽然还没有全部出现在资产负债表上，却迟早会转化为真实的融资需求。所以市场看到的并不是单纯的科技繁荣，而是一波即将持续涌入市场的债券供给。债券供给增加本来就会推高殖利率，如果投资人同时开始怀疑这些 AI 项目能否创造足够现金流，那么要求的风险溢价还会进一步上升。也就是说 AI 行业面对的风险不是没有技术，而是技术能不能变成稳定、持续、足以覆盖资本成本的收入。这也是 OpenAI 和 Anthropic 之间最值得观察的地方。Anthropic 的收入增长看起来非常亮眼，甚至已经出现了微薄的调整后营业利润，但高增长并不等于高质量的商业模式，尤其是 AI 模型正在快速商品化，客户可以根据价格、速度和性能在不同模型之间切换。如果转换成本很低，那么模型供应商就很难长期维持定价权。Cloud Opus 的能力可能非常强， Cloud Code 也可能是 Anthropic 目前最重要的收入来源，但能力越强，安全审查和大规模部署往往就越复杂。更重要的是，编程正是中国模型进步最快的领域之一，而编程工具又很容易被客户拿来进行横向比较。只要竞争者能够以更低价格提供接近的效果，领先优势就可能迅速转化为价格压力。因此 Anthropic 的上市并不只是某一家公司的融资事件，它很可能成为整个 AI 投资逻辑的一次公开检验。假如市场相信收入可以继续高速增长， AI 资本支出就可能再延续很长时间， AI 基础设施股票也可能继续受益。但假如市场开始看清楚模型商品化、利润率下降以及中国竞争加剧的问题，那么今天看起来宏大的建设计划就可能变成未来巨大的资本回报压力。这也解释了为什么限制中国 AI 模型可能会成为美国下一步的重要政策选项。中国模型更便宜、更强，会直接冲击美国模型公司的定价能力，进而影响数据中心投资的预期回报。如果美国企业被限制使用中国模型，美国供应商就可能保住更多客户和利润，云端巨头也会更有动力继续投入算力和基础设施。但这种做法并不能消除风险，只是把风险从商业竞争转移到了地缘政治。美国限制中国模型，中国就可能在稀土、关键矿产、芯片、手机产业链和美国企业在华业务等领域反制。双方越是试图把对方挡在市场之外，全球供应链就越容易分裂，企业成本也越容易上升。所谓保护本土产业，短期或许可以延缓竞争压力，但长期能否真正提升效率和创新，仍然需要市场来验证。所以这期内容留下的核心启示，并不是简单的判断 AI 会涨还是会跌，也不是只看某一家公司的上市估值，而是要把债券、美元、黄金、科技竞争和政策干预放在同一张图里观察。 AI 投资热潮的生命线，一端连接着模型的商业化能力，另一端连接着低成本融资。当利率上升、债务增加、利润率收窄和国际竞争同时出现时，任何一个环节出现问题，都可能通过金融市场迅速传导。川普试图压住长期利率，说明政府不愿意让债券市场直接终结 AI 资本支出周期，但市场从来不会因为政策命令就消失，债券投资人仍然会要求回报，消费者仍然会比较价格，企业仍然会选择更便宜的模型，国际竞争也不会因为禁令而停止。政策可以改变风险暴露的时间和方向，却很难永久改变经济规律。接下来最值得关注的就是长期国债殖利率会不会再次上行。 美元能否维持强势？黄金是否继续获得资金流入 ？Anthropic 上市时，市场会给出怎样的估值？以及美国是否真的会限制中国大型语言模型？如果这些事情同时朝着更激烈的方向发展，那么 AI 交易面对的就不再只是估值调整，而可能是一次关于融资、竞争和政策边界的全面重新定价。你认为 Anthropic 的上市会成为 AI 繁荣的新起点，还是会暴露出这场资本支出热潮最脆弱的一面？你又怎么看美国压低长期利率、限制中国模型以及黄金走强之间的关系？欢迎在评论区留下你的判断，也欢迎点赞订阅，继续观看更多精彩视频。